reasons I guess the philosophy behind our organic management. So I'm Rella Abernathy. I'm on the board of Beyond Pesticides, and I'm also a staff member for the city of Boulder in Colorado, where we use all of the techniques that we're going to be talking about today in practice, so it works. And we have a great panel here who's going to talk about a number of non-ag kind of management issues, from structural pests all the way to turf, natural areas, and retail, like where do you get safe plants, where do you get the products to build your soil. And so without much further ado, I'm just going to go right into it. So what we'll do is we'll have some short presentations, and then we'll open it all up for questions. So our first speaker is also a board member. It's Chip Osborne of Osborne Organics in Marblehead, Massachusetts. Chip is really a world-renowned expert in natural turf management. And he's had over 10 years experience in that, in creating safe, sustainable, and healthy athletic fields and landscapes. Chip has over 35 years, though, experience as a horticulturist, and is a former owner and operator of a wholesale and retail nursery. And that's where he gained firsthand experience with pesticides and realized there had to be a better way. And through his investigation and hands-on experimentation, Chip has become one of the country's leading experts on growing organic turf. So, Chip, let you go.
Thank you, Rella. And good morning. So the idea is we're all going to talk for about 10 minutes and sort of set the stage, and then we'll follow up with big picture later on this afternoon. You'll hear that Lani and I manage and strictly in the managed landscape, although I do pasture work, but my specialty is sports fields and that type of situation. And Lani is out west managing with goats on wide range lands and reclaimed oil fields. You're going to hear we're talking about exactly the same thing. I use aerators and bags of fertilizer and irrigation, and her goats aerate with hoof action. They fertilize, they irrigate, and they reclaim the land and build microbial life. It really is all about the microbial life in the soil, and that's a reoccurring theme that you've heard last night and then again today. And we know in the managed landscape, as long as we get off of this pesticide treadmill and acknowledge the soil and the role that the soil plays, especially the biological. Now, we can all just go back to high school when some high school biology teacher put up a hand and said it's a handful of soil contains billions of organisms that nature put there to grow something. So as long as we acknowledge that, and that we understand that everything that we've been taught conventionally throws right in the face of that it doesn't pertain. So all of these synthetic fertilizer products, all of the synthetic pesticides bypass the microorganisms in the soil. Not only do they bypass, they have the ability to diminish. Because synthetic water-soluble fertilizers, as well as leaching into areas that we don't want them to go, they're salt. They're just mineral salts, and the biomass does not like salt. So the idea is, when the managed landscape, we focus on building the biomass. When we talk about organic, we talk about, like in South Portland, and talk about the ordinance. The conventional industry says, well, you're just talking about organic pesticides. It's just a pesticide switch from one kind to another, and it's not. Our intention is never to get on a pesticide treadmill. The intention is to break that treadmill and begin to create a system that solves problems. So if we want to take away the pesticide, the synthetic pesticide, or even organic pesticides, there are pesticides that are approved for organic production. So if something does get out of control, on a rescue basis, we do have a list of materials that is allowed that we can reach for. But we shouldn't even have to reach for that if we do it correctly. In the plenary, I'm going to show you some pictures this afternoon where we haven't even intervened with organic pesticides, because you don't need to. Once you address that soil and address it as a system, we get on the right track. So what we've been taught conventionally by the industry is a product-centered approach. The industry is selling us a series of bags, boxes, or bottles to put down by the calendar date at certain times of the year to manage. Sometimes in reaction to a pest, and many times, like the imidacloprid and the neonicotinoids, in advance of a pest. So we're front-loading a system with an undesirable material, either on a just-in-case or because it's cheaper or easier than doing a scouting and a monitoring and treating after the fact. So as long as we acknowledge the soil, what we are actually doing is putting in a series of preventative steps so that problems don't ever get out of control. It's important to understand that the conventional approach has us treating symptoms. So in the managed landscape, especially residential, the big issue is crabgrass. I have a problem in my lawn, I have crabgrass. Crabgrass isn't the problem. Crabgrass is the symptom of underlying problems. Problems that could be compaction, the bare spot of the size of a silver dollar, thin turf, cutting the grass too short. That's the problem. You change those problems, the symptom goes away. We've done it time and time again, and that really is the foundation. A good definition of organic land management is putting that series of preventative steps in place. If we build the soil properly, we're going to have a fungal organism in there called trichoderma, amongst other fungal organisms, that will outcompete most turfgrass diseases. So now we've put a defense in the soil by getting the right consortium of organisms. So science has identified for us what organisms we need to successfully grow trees, ornamental beds, turf grass, and as long as we balance the appropriate organisms along with balancing some things in the soil from the chemical perspective, like the pH and nutrient, correcting nutrient deficiencies, we get on the, on the track to being able to manage. So you heard last night about the soil, about those exudates that go down and photosynthesis. We can, if we go with certain grasses, if we move from 1 3/4 to 2.5 inches, the ability of that grass to reproduce itself increases tenfold because photosynthesis happens better. In other cases, by letting it go from 2 to 3, we can improve photosynthesis 300%. And what that is doing is producing those carbohydrates, sugars, and amino acids that sustain the turf grass, but most importantly, 35 or 40% of that production goes down into the root system as an exudate and is released into the biomass, and organisms, that's cake and ice cream for the organisms, the desirable ones that we want. And they will come to that grass and colonize that grass and give us those defenses. They won't colonize weeds in the same way. So we understand that, and that takes us into that management. So we have expectations to meet, and we can do that. We can go from golf to sports turf to residential lawns. There's probably too much grass in the world, and some should be reduced and eliminated. But the bottom line is it's not all going to go away. An appropriate patch of grass around a residential property, the golf, the sports turf, the public parks are all going to remain, and we clearly have to be able to learn how to manage that in a non-chemical way. We use OMRI compatible products, Organic Materials Review Institute. I design programs now for school districts, colleges, municipalities, where 90% of all the materials that we're using are OMRI certified. Down in Massachusetts, Springfield, Massachusetts, started off 2 years ago with 850,000 square feet and transitioning from chemicals to organic. And I was working with them, and after a year, 14 months, we are now at 2.3 million square feet, all non-chemical management. They were so happy just in that first year and a half that they've expanded the program. So we can meet success. We do manage to expectations. High expectations, higher product input, higher cost. Low expectations, lower product input, lower cost. That being said, high expectations is not necessarily good, and low expectations is certainly not bad. It's the right expectation for the right site. So what we are not doing is a product for product swap out. We are not looking at those conventional products and focusing on what the organic alternative is. We are focusing on a systems-based approach where we're incorporating 3 distinct concepts. We are focusing on that biologically active soil, the exclusive use of natural organic product, OMRI certified, and then incorporating the appropriate cultural practices, the way we water, the way we aerate, the way we do those cultural practices that combine with the first 2 parts of the systems-based approach. And now we're not just managing that grass that we look at, we are managing everything that we see and everything that we don't see. It's important that we remember that synthetics hurt the soil and that organic products build the soil. When the grass gets nitrogen from a bag of fertilizer, it does not know where it came from because it can only use it in the inorganic form. That's why we went to a laboratory and created that type of material. But what we do know is that synthetic products hurt the soil and organic products build the soil. So when we are using organic methods of fertility derived from nature, grains or animal byproducts, we are fostering and building that biomass. So we have to get off of that pesticide treadmill. Once you are on it, you are just spinning your wheels and you will be constantly on it. It's also important to know that if you're using those pre-emergent crabgrass controls and some of those products, they are being sold to you strictly to generate revenue for a corporation. Because you put those crabgrass products down every April. What happened, and they have no intention of helping you grow good grass, and they certainly don't want to solve your problem. So what they are doing is their revenue is totally dependent on convincing you to treat a symptom, when our organic management is helping us solve the problem, and then the symptom goes away. So that's really the big difference between the two. And we always approach this in land management as a transition. It doesn't happen overnight. Pesticides are quick fix, instant gratification, and organic is a little more slow, but a little more deliberate. But once we get there, we've gotten there, we're off the treadmill, and we can successfully move forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Chip. We'll have more information, more good information this afternoon, and we'll have plenty of time for questions today. So I'm going to move on next to our next speaker, who's Lani Malmberg, who is another board member for Beyond Pesticides. And Lani always gives a great talk, so I'm here for a treat. So Lani grew up in a cattle ranching family, and while in graduate school studying weed science, she got the idea to offer a goat grazing service for those who didn't want to spray chemicals for weed management. So she's grown her business, which is called Ewe4ic. It's spelled in a creative way.
Now it's goat green.
Ecological Services and she has 1,200 cashmere goats working for governments and private landowners for noxious weed control, fire reduction, reseeding, watershed management, land restoration. She also offers noxious weed mapping and inventory, and she doesn't own any land. And because she is a gypsy goat herder, she goes to where the work is. So, and working in 10 western states. So here, Lani, take it away.
Thank you.
I'll sit out here for a minute.
So Chip explains it better than anybody. And Chip and I say the same thing. And he was just talking about symptoms versus the problem. And so I'm big on that too. Now, of this year, they've asked Chip and I to be in this breakout session first, which is supposed to be how to do it. And then the plenary, we talk about what it is second, and it's backwards. So it's a bit difficult for me to go backwards because you guys have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'm going to kind of do the same thing, and you guys sleep through what you could sleep through the thing this afternoon, because I have to show the same pictures or you don't understand what I'm talking about. So just push the button.
Right, so right.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I started this business 21 years ago with my two sons, and that's a career. Whoops. Okay.
Is it not working?
No.
All right. I'll do it.
Okay. Those are my two sons. I sent them off to find their own passions. This is the younger one, Donnie, and he came back in '09, and the two of us run the business, but Reggie comes and helps whenever we need help. This is in Jackson Hole. Did you do that, Amela, or did I?
Yeah, I did that.
Okay, go.
Do you want me to go again?
Yeah. So this is what we did, is I started a business to give people an alternative to machinery and chemicals. And that was in 1996. But it's building a living system that's actually functioning. The bugs are doing their job, the soil's holding the water, everything's alive, everything's balanced, things are being recycled, and the water's held in place. Okay? And this is the alternative to machinery. I did a side-by-side project for Chevron Oil. I do oil field reclamation work. And 60 acres to the north, they were using giant machinery. And then I was the 60 acres to the south. okay? So I asked them, how much does this machinery weigh? In that last picture of that big earth mover, they told me that weighs 80,000 pounds, okay? My herd weighed 150,000 pounds. So my herd is a much bigger machine than their machine, than one of their machines, but they had like 18 or 27 different machines, different pieces of equipment, all pulled by different bigger machines and all run on fossil fuels. So this is my 150,000 pound living energy workforce, self-propelled. And here's what it boils down to. Okay, so this is what they are. They're self-propelled, and they're doing actually 15 things at the same time. When people say, well, we can't afford you, we're going to spray because we can spray for $70 a quart, and oh, that makes me so mad when people say that to me. And I say, well, first of all, you can't do what we do because we're doing all of this. And we are not chasing symptoms, like Chip said. But Chip said the organic way is slower. I don't think it is slower, but it's underground, so you can't see it. People can't see us balancing fungi and bacteria underground. They can't see the water holding capacity increased and the water held in there. They can't see that, so they don't think anything's happening. So it isn't slower, but we're going right to the goal. So anyway, these goats are doing all these things. And goats are opposite to cattle and horses, who are grazers. Goats are browsers, so they prefer weeds. Okay? This is a big balance of art and science when you have 2,000 head of goats. 2,500 is the biggest herd I've had, and I'll do anything that anybody pays me for. So the smallest job was I took 35 baby goats to a backyard in Denver to eat dandelions. The biggest job is on 2 million acres for Chevron, working way out in the wilds of Wyoming. But it's a balance of art and science, handling these animals, paying attention to the science of the soil and the soils test. I take soils test everywhere I go, and designing the plant species mix for seeding. Okay, so I always get these calls. The people have, this is common mullein, which is a biannual plant, and people hate this plant. It's a biannual. This is Colorado Springs down below. I'm up on top of the side of a mountain, and this is all mullein, and this is from their failed spraying last year. So then they call me, and they never calculate the expense of their failed projects. You know, the true cost of spraying. Well, the true cost of spraying, here's a good example right here. Now we have mutated seeds, because they sprayed this and it didn't kill it. But I love to explain to these people, if you think of plants in succession, the annuals, you know, first you have bare ground, then you see annuals, then you see the biannuals, and then the deep-rooted perennials, and then grass, and then brush, and then trees. And that's just succession. So these biannuals, so how I explain it to these people who hate these so much is, these are the prep chefs in the restaurant. They do their job, and then they go home. You don't have to kill the prep chefs. If you kill the prep chefs, you're going to get a dirty whole potato on your plate instead of French fries. You don't need to kill the prep chef, but we need to get to the goal. If you're out here killing the symptoms, you know, you don't have a plate, but there is no soil here. This is the top of the Rocky Mountains, so we got to build soil. Anyway, lots of education. So I come in with the goats. The goats eat all these seed heads off and destroy it. The goats have narrow triangular mouths. They destroy all the seeds. So I've destroyed all these mutated seeds by failed herbicide spraying. I'm trying to build soil and recycling. Remember my list of 15 things that I'm doing? There? Okay, go ahead. And here they are picking all the seeds off from a mullein plant. They don't eat the leaves, but they don't need to. It's just the seed head. This is a biannual, okay? Twisted up musk thistle that was sprayed and it didn't quite kill it. And just more of that where you see they'd sprayed it, but look how thick this is. So this is in Estes Park, Colorado. They sprayed it and the plant came back and produced 1,000 more heads than what they had to start with. plus all the twisted and turned and curled mutated seeds, and they say, well, we can't afford you. Go ahead. And I say, well, you can't afford not to. Go ahead. And this is what we do. This is in the oil fields in Wyoming for Chevron, but that's a list of what we do on different jobs, and this is who we work for. And so since '96, 12 western states, these are very well-traveled goats. And these older ones have been on a semi-truck 700 or 800 times to get to all these jobs. But this kind of went off the screen, but when people say, oh, you must have incredible voltage in that electric fence. No, this is all built on respect. Respect from us to the land, us to who we're working for, us to the animals to the land, the goats to the border collies, which border collies run our whole operation, and everything back to us, but everything is living. Everything's alive. Okay? Not yet, sorry. Okay. Now I'm going to speed up here because I'm supposed to tell you how to do it. This is what I do, is manage risk. I only want you guys to write down one thing, and that is what I've learned herding goats. Control is an illusion. And nothing teaches you better than a herd of goats. But anyway, this is what I manage for risk, okay? Things go wrong, okay? I was in the middle of Denver. This is one of ours, caught in the electric fence, okay? Antelope running through the, this is out in the Wyoming, okay? Antelope baby caught in our electric fence, okay? And you gotta have common sense. Everything's gotta be in balance. You have to be very professional. I always say I'm a professional goat herder. You must be extremely flexible as weather comes and wild animals come in and people's loose dogs are chasing your goats and drunks are running through your electric fence at 3 o'clock in the morning. And one guy on the team has to have passion. That's me. That's my job. And you have to have utmost integrity. Okay? And just when you're talking about the animals, you know, you have the goats and you're doing herd health management, breeding, kidding, herd behavior, the trucking, your rapport with the herd in this respect. And then we have herding dogs and guardian dogs. And then you have the wildlife and the predators and livestock of ranchers running livestock. These are the animals we have to manage because we're on contract to do a job, okay? This is guard dog Sally, which isn't a problem in western Wyoming, but it is when you're working in the city of Denver, okay? In Wyoming again, in the oil field, going down a pipeline. Go ahead, you're okay. Just keep going. So babies on the job. These babies are less than 3 days old, and I walked them 3 miles, okay, to the next thing. I just got on the road and went down, okay. They're playing on the water truck, which I thought was hilarious, but okay. Oh, it's so funny. Problem with predators here. Guess what my problem was here? Predators. Birds. Nope. Nope. There was no shade, and they were crawling down the badger holes. And H2S gas, which is a byproduct of the oil field, is heavy and dense and rolls downhill. H2S was in the badger holes. They would go down there dry. You never, people think, oh, you have trouble with coyotes? Never coyotes. So that was a surprise, okay? Wild horses running through.
What kind of dogs are the guard dogs?
Akbash, Anatolian for us. Sorry, I answered her question. I apologize, I'll get yours. Wild horses, big problem of chasing, I mean, they follow us and then they run through our fence, okay? And then we manage the plants of, so I have a degree in botany, biology, and a master's degree in weed science, so, you know, I know this because I had to learn it, okay? Sometimes on a job, this is on an Air Force base, you have noxious weeds, endangered species, poisonous plants, all in the same place, okay? This is when I talk about succession. Oh, am I at 10? Yeah. I'm sorry, I wasn't watching it. So this is how I work, is I'm either pushing succession forward or backwards with my 150,000 pounds. Thank you. Sorry, Rella. I didn't see you.
There'll still be time for questions. Okay, so now we're gonna move towards the retail end. And that there are some great hardware stores doing the right thing. So John Bochert started his career as a performing musician and entertainer. After running his own natural food business, he became involved in the green industry and has been working as a lawn and garden specialist in retail since 1991. In 2013, John began working with Eldredge Lumber Hardware, a large family-owned full-service hardware store in York, Maine. His mission at the store is to transition lawn and garden department to organic methods and products with the store's owner, Scott Eldredge. Both John and Scott were closely involved in helping to pass the Algonquin, Maine cosmetic pesticide ban ordinance. And I think that you'll all realize how important it is to have this kind of commitment from retail store owners who aren't just switching out products, who are going to follow the principles that Chip and Lani are talking about. So,
Thanks, Rella. As she said, I spent a lot of time in the green industry since 1991, and I don't know if you've ever heard this line, but there's nothing green about the green industry. Between the plastics used to push out flowers these days and the pesticides being used on flower seedlings that are sold everywhere, it's anything but a green industry. In the conventional industry, when I was working for a conventional garden center, I would sell chemicals, I would sell organic materials. If somebody asked me my opinion, I would say organic. I've always been organic at my own home. If I used any chemicals at all, it would be maybe a broken bag or two from the store to try it out and see what happens. I was never very impressed with anything that I used that was chemical. And I realized that there were no problems in your lawn and landscapes that couldn't be solved organically. I became aware of this slowly as I got into my 21st or 22nd year in the business. As I get older, I was starting to lose my hours, and I was thinking about a retirement to my own home to work on my own garden. I was looking forward to it, and along comes Scott Eldredge to recruit me, as it were. I'd go into the store. We'd talked for years about different things. We'd always have conversations. I've known him for a long time, and he'd look at me and say, "Do you need a job?" And I'd say, I got a job. You know, I'll be collecting my Social Security pretty soon. My wife and I will sell one of our cars, and everything will be just fine. So about the third time he said that, I said, "Well, what are you offering?" And of course, my wife was reminding me that the proper way to do it is to work for a living until your last dying breath. She reminded me of that. So it was an opportunity, and I took it, and I've never regretted it. Eldredge Lumber Hardware in York is one of the most incredibly busy places I've ever been in. We have an incredibly loyal clientele. We see the same faces every day. 70 to 80 deliveries from the yard per day in spring, summer, and fall. 175 employees, and about 75,000 different SKUs in the store itself. And if you've ever been in there, it's like 40,000 square feet of stuff pushed into 20,000 square feet. And the only reason I say that is the lawn and garden section has been doing very well, and since we started changing over. But I just want to put it in perspective that there never seems to be enough room to display all the things we need to display, and it's just one part of a big operation. One of the first things that Scott wanted me to do was to come up with a mission statement. This is originally back in 2013, and the mission statement was quite simple. Our mission to maximize our customers' knowledge and use of organic materials and techniques, and to minimize the use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers. So that was something I could live with, because that is wide open. You're going to promote one side, and you're going to demote the other side. Well, when we got involved with Algonquin, Jay Feldman got a hold of the news that there was a hardware store that was switching over to these organic techniques. And he wanted to come by the store immediately, and that's how we got in touch with Beyond Pesticides. And we were walking down the aisle. Our organic aisle now is about probably about 80 feet, compared with the 8 feet for the chemicals. The chemicals have been reduced to about 8 feet, linear feet. There are still chemicals on the shelf, and I'll explain about that as we go on here. But so anyway, Jay's walking down the aisle with me, and he looks at me and he says, "This is national." And I said, "National?" And here I was. I thought I was just an hourly worker at a hardware store, and things started to snowball from there. We have literally not done any promotion of our own. I get calls since we started doing this. I get calls from Reader's Digest wanting to reprint a story that Down East Magazine did, things like that. Calls from newspapers were mentioned. Of course, Jay's promoting us everywhere. I see my face everywhere on the Beyond Pesticide stuff. I'm quite flattered by it. But I just wanted to give everybody that background, that it's been a wonderful ride in a way. I keep thinking about how much further we have to go. I mean, we haven't even touched social media. I mean, if you went online right now and went to the Facebook for Eldredge, I don't think it would be mentioned what we're doing in the store. And yet people are starting to beat a path to our door. And in this whole thing, Scott Eldredge, he keeps saying that he's ready to drop every chemical in the store in favor of organics. The operation manager, Matt Brock, I can't say enough about the people that work there, and the people that manage the store have been incredibly cooperative from the beginning. And I had a clean palette to do whatever I wanted to do. And it's been great that way. However, the point I want to bring up, and it's only a question that I deal with every day, is mitigation versus elimination. And it's always been my contention that if you eliminate all the chemicals in the store, you also eliminate all the people who want those chemicals, and you lose the opportunity to try and steer them towards the organic things. And I'm always in favor of mitigation. And I'll give you a couple of concrete examples. There's a product called Stump and Vine Killer, for instance, that I like to keep on the shelf. It's a small bottle. It's dicamba. It's a deadly herbicide. It has a dabber on. You pull out the top, and it has a dabber on it. It's designed to cut a vine, bittersweet, raspberries, cut the vine, and you dab the dicamba on the end of it. Now, it's a deadly herbicide going into the soil. Yes, it's going directly into the plant. It's not being sprayed. It's probably not being sprayed near water. It's not being sprayed at all. And the point I'd like to make is that I like having that on the shelf, because somebody comes in with a serious problem with an invasive or something like that, and you can point them to it, and they're using far less chemicals than they would if they were going to be spraying the foliage of things over a wide area. But I'm constantly having second thoughts about this. I know Jay, I was talking to him about it, and he thinks that it's a zero-sum game for a lot of people. And for me, in the retail business, it's like my day in the retail business. I was thinking about it. It's like having a permanent workshop. It's like a 9-hour workshop, constantly, all day long. People have problems. You try to evaluate their expectations. That's the first thing I do, is try to evaluate to see where they want to be with their lawns. Do they want it to look like Augusta National? Or you can go right to the other side of it. Some people don't do anything to their lawns. They cut it once a year, and they don't care how many strawberries are growing in it or plantain or anything else. They try to find out what their expectations are, and then try to draw them into the right products. We eliminated neonicotinoids. Were the first thing to go initially a long time ago. I should say a long time ago. Feels like a long time ago. In that first year, we eliminated the neonicotinoids, and then Roundup went. Last year, we stopped carrying Roundup and glyphosate. And again, the transition for me and the mitigation for me was to drop the Roundup and to just have the ACE brand glyphosate on the shelf, just for the year. Again, as a transition for people, get them away from the Roundup, get them to the glyphosate. Well, the newspaper does a story about us and says we've dropped glyphosate from the products, and that pushed us in that direction. So you can say that a journalist pushed us in that direction a little faster than we were ready to. But I think in all this, I agree. Every one of these workshops we go to, and every one of these talks ends up on the same point: the living soil, and how the soil needs to be protected, and we need to take care of the microorganisms in the soil. And as you turn the corner to go down the organic aisle, the first 4 feet, I have signs over everything. The first 4 feet is titled "The Living Soil." There's a huge poster of, I don't know if anybody knows about Elaine Ingham, who is the Soil Food Web is her business, and she's a soil biologist. And she's got this nice chart of about 30 or 40 different soil organisms. They look at that. They look at microbial stimulants and things like that in that area. And to just get people, and when you can get their ear for a minute and talk about the relationship between these microorganisms, I think I heard 450 million years since plants have been on the earth. They've made use, the symbiosis has been going on. And once somebody listens to that, and you say to them, are you going to go with that? Are you going to enhance that? Or are you going to go against that? 450 million years. And that's where we start in the store, and it usually works out pretty well. And there's been an overwhelming positive response to what we're doing. So we hope it continues. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So while we're not focused on soil, many of the same themes that I'll discuss in my presentation are very similar to what is being done through turf management and soils as well. So this is the, let's see, this did not work, right?
Not at all.
So this is the Integrated Pest Management and Healthcare Facilities Project with the goal of working with hospitals and healthcare facilities currently just in Maryland to actually reduce and eliminate pesticides inside. We started in 2005, as Rella mentioned. It's a partnership of Beyond Pesticides and Maryland Pesticide Network. And right now we have over a dozen healthcare facilities and several medical systems where we provide our resources to make them pest as well as pesticide free. The mission is to protect vulnerable patients and staff from the dangers of pests and toxic pesticides through a management approach for indoor environments. And obviously, I don't have, obviously at a healthcare facility, that's the location where vulnerable populations exist, whether you're being born or suffering from a disease or being treated for a disease, you're going to be more susceptible to the effects of toxic pesticides. This information is not new. American Medical Association has pointed this out. Particularly uncertainty exists regarding the long-term health effects of low-dose pesticide exposure, and considering the data gaps, it is prudent to limit pesticide exposure and to use the least toxic chemical pesticide or non-chemical alternative. That was back in 1997. Even further ago, next slide. Just keep hitting. The Department of Veteran Affairs, as far back in 1986, said pest management in healthcare facilities differs from control practice in other institutions. The effects on patients requires that a cautious policy be adopted concerning all uses of pesticides. So keep going. What does integrated pest management mean for healthcare facilities? It's not just, and as Chip mentioned as well, it's not just switching to a different pesticides. I mean, it's least toxic or something it's supposedly organic. It's really a systems approach change. We enter a partnership with the facility, and they have a commitment to measures that prevent pests. It's a full systems change where we're focusing on the causes of the pest and eliminating those causes, eliminating those conditions. And once those pests are eliminated, that eliminates the need for pesticides, and especially used as a preventive, a continued cycle of pesticides. Next slide. So I mentioned systems change toward pest management focusing on strategies that provide long-term prevention and suppression. So the emphasis on monitoring, inspections, education should be bolded because that is an incredible part of the program, and it's not just, and I'll mention this later on, it's not just educating the facility to deal with a pest management company, for example, but it's all levels of the staff. whether it's facilities, environmental services, the doctors, knowing how their roles can contribute or reduce pests through their actions. And then structural, mechanical, cultural, and biological controls would be the next step. The IPM strategies identify and eliminate conditions that enable the pest to survive. So we look at eliminating food, restricting entry, controlling habitat, sanitation, vacuuming, pest proofing, waste disposal, structural maintenance, mechanical traps, and these are all things that eliminate the conditions where pests survive and prevent them. And then least toxic pesticides are used as a last resort, but that is not the focus at all. The focus is not to switch to least toxic. The focus is to use that only as least option after non-toxic measures have been exhausted. And the goal is not to deal with pests. The goal is not to manage a pest problem. The goal is having a system in place where pests, again, are prevented. I said least toxics are, again, these are things that become available and sometimes are used. But then again, the goal is not to use a least toxic. The goal is to keep pests prevented. Next slide. Conventional pest control. Traditionally, in healthcare facilities, as you can imagine, it has been used, and it has been used to keep pests, to prevent pests in a facility. And there is zero tolerance for roaches in an operating room or a diet. Obviously, as many of these workshops talked about, it does not, conventional pest control ignores the causes of an infestation and relies on routine scheduled pesticide application. Next slide. And these are the common pests in healthcare facilities, but also many other locations as well. Each facility has their own issues, some more than others, and it's sometimes the design flaws have created pest-conducive conditions. Sometimes it's routines that that exist in staff that have created certain conditions, whether it's not cleaning drains properly or for other reasons. But we work with them on specific solutions to prevent each pest. So when we work with the healthcare facility, there's a written pesticide use survey, a major walkthrough outside and in by the team to evaluate the current conditions, all pest-conducive conditions. Sometimes there's major conditions that exist that could lead to an infestation. May not be pests yet, but there could lead to one, so adjusting that immediately is important. Vendor contract and IPM plan review, written assessment reports and recommendations, we have model IPM, natural land care policies, development of a plan and protocol in place for facility, and then using that plan or protocol or policy as a educational tool for the whole staff at a facility, and then employee training, and then implementation assistance. So with that initial walkthrough, there's a focus is obviously problem areas in all facilities include loading docks and receiving areas, all the dietary areas, staff lounges and break rooms sometimes are the top of the list. The custodial storage, utility rooms, and dumpsters, trash compactors are common areas where we have to focus on, especially in warmer months, and then external grounds as well. Next slide. And there's going to be a lot of pictures coming up that are not indicative of any particular facility, but things that we have seen over the time that kind of scream to us and say, and things that we've corrected over time where we made recommendations. Clutter, for example, and based on time, I'm not going to go too much into detail, but I'll point out a few examples that can be corrected. Clutter, not only do pests live and thrive or could be transported into a facility from cardboard boxes, but it prevents inspection. It prevents the ability to identify another condition that might be existing behind any of these clutters during inspections. Next slide. Dirty drains. These dirty conditions under equipment in a dietary area, for example, the kitchen looks spotless, but underneath the equipment, there is areas that were definitely missed. Keep going. Sometimes drains, for example, are cleaned, but then because of design flaws or the way a kitchen is laid out, drains exist underneath equipment that is stationary or hard to reach, and those are the ones that are missed. Water leaks, areas around pipes, areas behind trash cans, areas where sometimes are that are just missed, and that's not just from any fault, but it might be a lack of education or understanding about how these conditions are leading to a potential or an existing infestation of roaches or flies. Here's an example of a monitor over over an area where the caulk is degraded around some equipment. Rather than just putting, obviously monitors are not toxic, rather just putting monitors or pesticides to treat an issue, understanding that caulking around equipment or repairing holes or cracks and crevices will eliminate the habitat for pests in these kitchen examples. Doorways. It's probably the most common location for pests to enter actually any building. Is not the front door, back door. It's not through any secret crack or crevice. It's through the front door or back door that don't seal properly, don't close properly, missing door sweeps. They'll enter the same way you guys enter. So it's and when staff understand that a door has to close properly and it needs door sweeps and able to identify that and make those recommendations themselves, that eliminates a major entry point for many different types of pests. An IPM program and policy is created and includes so strategies for eliminating pest conducive conditions. Running out of time. So these are all strategies that we work on with hospitals to prevent these pests. Once they are adopted, the facility also works with coordination, be tracking the actions of pest management technician, reviewing logs. That's what we work on with them to discuss what products they're using, what preventive measures are they using, what recommendations are they recording, and then the facility can follow up with. These are, you can look at one or two of these. These are all common recommendations. Next one's gonna be a lot more. I just put them all out on the page to say these are common recommendations that are usually not addressed regularly. Sometimes the technician might record them many, many times before a facility actually addresses them. Making sure they actually, just keep going. Real quick, a lot of times, sometimes the focus is a little bit too much on the inside, but making sure that the building envelope on the outside has a great seal as well. Knowing that pests enter in a building from outside, and making sure that the bushes are removed back, making sure there's no access entryways, making sure there's potentially, I don't have the picture, but gravel barriers, and then leave this one up, and then when it's not just a result where the pest management technician understands that their role has changed, but when the entire staff understands that, as past speakers have commented on, it's not just a switch in how a pest company manages the potential pest problem, but when there's a full change within the hospital to create a different approach to managing a facility through the maintenance, through the cleaning, through the observing and inspecting the facility. It creates an understanding of what could potentially lead to a pest infestation. Not only do you not have pesticides, pests, but the whole facility is cleaner because of this. And that's the ultimate goal of a healthcare facility as well, a very clean, healthy environment for patients and guests. I think that's my last slide. Real quick, I'm not going to read this. One of the facilities adopted a great policy, has that quote in their official plan. Next slide. Several facilities have won awards for being completely pesticide free and toxic pesticide free and adopting policies and protocols in place. And that is it. It's the ongoing efforts. Obviously, I work with about a dozen facilities in Maryland, but we see.
Well, every job is different. What is the job? When it's reseeding and reclamation, they need to poop, pee, and walk across it. That's it. If it's a perennial weed, we need to make sure they eat all the seed heads off and strip all the leaves off, so that stops all reproduction of the plant. Can't flower and go to seed and can't photosynthesize if it has no leaves. If it's fire mitigation, they need to eat all the fire tinder. You know, it just depends, and it's all different, but the more goats you have, the faster you go. And the season of year makes a very big difference of how fast I move, and the behavior of the animals and the behavior of the plants changes in the 4 seasons. So I know which season I need to be on which job to go the fastest.
And so, in the South, I was in the South for several winters, they are using goats to help with the kudzu problem.
Yeah, yep.
Had you heard that?
Oh yeah, it's perfect application. Goats love kudzu.
Any other questions?
This is for Chip. If the owners of a golf course are interested in transitioning from pesticides to organic, where would be the best way to start to get the information?
So golf courses are ones that we're beginning to work on. I work with the National Park Service as a volunteer, Jay and I, and we're managing 12 national parks for the government right now and have been for 4 years. And I just started a golf course last year. So what we're doing is developing those protocols. And the way we're doing it is taking a one hole and stopping all pesticides. There is provision for a rescue treatment if and when needed, but we made it through last year with no fungicides at all on greens and tees and no damage to, the system. So that is, one of the things. There aren't a lot of examples right now of chemical-free golf courses. So what we've decided to do is this kind of an approach where we're, when invited into a course or a site, beginning to teach the principles of this systems-based approach and then beginning to direct them to the appropriate product. And the most important product in a golf course is to restore soil health, because historically there's a lot of fungicide pressure. And with that fungicide pressure, there's this extreme diminishing of soil health. So we're beginning here, and we don't know. There's no other real organization that is actively going out there and transitioning golf courses. So Jay and I have developed a program where we're beginning that.
So do you have a business card for?
Sure. Yep. I can give that. Sure.
Because I know the city of Portland has discussed the possibility of going in.
And we do it little by little. It's a transition period. So as other product is being stopped or withdrawn, we're introducing new product. And the best way to do it, rather than a limited basis across the whole golf course, is to pick 1 or 2 holes and just bite the bullet and stop the chemicals and immediately start to transition.
Hang on, you might be
Guys,
next.
when we're moving that mic around, it's cutting out, so
Oh,
we're gonna have to move you and not.
okay.
Questions for Lani. You'd mentioned the gas being down there as a possible death trap for them. Have you seen anything in reproductive health from the goats that browse on the sprayed chemical fields and areas like that? So have you seen any illnesses with adults or in the birthing process and anything like what happens, let's say, in areas where biochemical had been in Sarnia with like fish and dogs and things like that?
No, but typically those who hire me don't spray. So it's usually, not an issue, but we get so much in the air, I'm the one that gets sick. In northern Texas, working on a cotton field, I got sick. But another thing is poisonous plants. My goats have eaten all the poisonous plants in all the western states to no ill effect whatsoever. They can eat poison hemlock, and they have it. I didn't know it, but they have an enzyme in their saliva that detoxifies poison hemlock before they swallow. But my herd, doing this 21 years, moving around in 12 western states and eating all the poisonous plants, my herd has a tremendous memory and ability to digest and utilize everything.
Yeah, I know the iron stomach of them.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
concern was always that if
Yeah.
someone did spray one time, like some of those curled
But
stalks.
what I tell people usually is that has gone into the soil and is in your groundwater, and the people got it long before I got here.
Okay, just wondering if they
Yeah.
had any kind of.
But no, never trouble yet.
Okay.
Yet, I'll say.
This is a question for Chip. In our present ordinance that we hope will be ratified soon, the pesticides
The one thing that we absolutely know from almost 20 years worth of work is that if you want to successfully reduce and eliminate chemical pesticides, you absolutely have to eliminate synthetic fertilizers. Synthetic fertilizers and chemical pesticides were marketed at the same time. Fertilizers, the Haber-Bosch process that creates urea, happened a little bit before World War II, and the pesticides were post World War II. When they were marketed together. Clover was part of every grass seed mix prior to the war. The industry came along in the early 50s and said, clover's a weed, here's a pesticide to kill it. They just happen to have a bag over here of synthetic nitrogen to give you the nitrogen you lost when you killed the weed. So synthetic fertilizer use creates ultimately a dependence upon synthetic pesticides. So in order to be successful, as I mentioned, synthetics damage soil, organics build soil. So in order to successfully move away from pesticides and maintain a system that meets expectations, at that same time that you stop the pesticides, you absolutely have to introduce organic methods of fertility.
Yeah, I wanted to point out one more thing. There's a new paper that was just published that I think we all need to understand about using these synthetic fertilizers and nitrates. Not only do they contaminate water and very persistent in water for a long time, we all know about eutrophication and blue baby syndrome. They're also endocrine disruptors. But these things are persistent in soil, just like neonics. And this paper showed that 10, 20 more years, these things persist in soil and continue contaminating, and then causing these environmental impacts that Chip's talking about. And if anybody's interested, I can give you the link to that paper. It was just published. So that's another reason not to use synthetic fertilizers.
When she stops talking. Sorry. I thought I'd get it back to the middle.
I work at a sewage treatment plant, technically they call it water reclamation. And we actually have the largest water reclamation plant in the world. This is Sydney and Chicago. So I know that historically we've used pesticides, herbicides, you name it, simply because we work in the middle of plenty of organics. And all of the plant life there pretty much is it's hyper-fertilized. We've been mowing our grounds now for a solid month, despite the occasional snowfall and sleet. It's still growing. And the most efficient way to cover all of our acreage, we have over 100 acres throughout the Chicagoland area. And it's not just straight, it's not just wide open grass expanses. We have a lot of structures in the middle of our grass, pipes, buildings, you name it, it's water reclamation. So when it comes to trying to find a more natural way to curtail the weeds and just keep our turf decent so it's not a nuisance to the community, soil that has been heavily sprayed, will it need to be replaced, or can we begin using, alternative techniques? Can that soil be converted? Can it be changed, or do you pretty much have to replace the soil with healthy soil in order to maintain this process? And if so, do you know of any companies that sell nationwide? Is healthy soil being sold anywhere on the market?
I'm gonna let Chip.
You don't need new soil. It's all about the protocols that you put in place. We need to restore soil health. So when we're doing this, sort of this urban land management, grass is a crop like any other crop. It's a crop that needs probably more nitrogen than nature can provide on its own. So nature provides nitrogen on its own very effectively for a lot of plants out in the landscape. But grass, if we're trying to manage up to higher expectations, needs a little bit more nitrogen. So there's a direct correlation between levels of nitrogen and decreasing weed populations, because as nitrogen appropriately is applied, the grass grows sideways. So we think of that mostly, but we're focused on the sideways growth, and that's what keeps weeds out of the system. So I just in the middle of a trial where I'm managing Kentucky bluegrass, which is the most labor-intensive, water-intensive, fertilizer-intensive grass of all the cool season grasses in the country. And we met our highest expectation with 1/3 of the nitrogen that the conventional industry would put down. Because what happens once you begin to transition to organic and focus on the soil and restore the health of the soil, that soil naturally is going to produce nitrogen for you. And so that means that there is less applied product over time, and then ultimately a decrease in cost over time. So the products that we use in year 1, year 2, certainly some focus on the grass that we can see, but in the programs I develop, the majority of the materials that are inputs focus directly on the soil. I can make an application of molasses, either liquid or granular, and stimulate bacterial life dramatically. I can make an application of a humate, a humic acid, and I will stimulate and grow fungal life. I can actually take a consortium of organisms and introduce them in there, those that might be missing, so native indigenous organisms to repopulate. Once we get them in there, then through the use of these other inputs, we start to grow them. So you're probably looking at a 2-year period maybe to restore soil health. And once that happens and you get to year 3 and beyond, you should be able to find that so much nitrogen is being produced in the system that you don't even need to buy as much fertilizer in the future.
And I'll say also that, no, you don't need new soil, but you need to bring the life back to it. And you need to bring fungi, bacteria, but you can use compost tea to do that. And heard of living something or another's, but also maybe different species of whatever you want to grow there. So whatever species you have now, if you could get to a different low-growing, slow-growing species of whatever would suit you better. So that would be your end point, the goal of get different species to grow.
I mean, we're actually at the point with all of this that we have a soil test that we can take that tells us exactly what is living in the soil and what may be missing. And then we can go to a company and they can produce for us a product that will address exactly what is missing in that acreage, and the application would become restorative. And then we put down, science has moved so far in that direction, we're light years ahead now of just putting down fertilizer from a bag.
Can you tell us who does that soil test?
Sure, there's 2 laboratories in the country. Is Ewe4ic in Corvallis, Oregon, and probably, in my opinion, the one I use, I guess, is Soil Food Web, New York. The principal's name is Paul Wagner. He is a leader, international leader in all of this. He studied under Elaine Ingham. It was originally her laboratory, and he has taken it over. The test is about $240 plus UPS charges, FedEx charges to get it there. But it will tell you exactly the total number of bacteria, exactly, but I mean it's extrapolated from a microscope. The total bacterial fraction, the total fungal fraction, and then most importantly, the active bacterial, because that's what's working for us. And the active fungal, that's what's giving us the disease resistance. Then it goes to the higher level predators like the protozoa, the slides you saw last night, the amoeba, the flagellates, the ciliates. So in a nutshell, what happens is you have a bacteria over here, single cell, that breaks down something organic, whether it's a decomposed root system, whether it's organic fertilizer, whether it's ground up leaves that gets put down there, whether it's a recycled grass clipping. The bacteria breaks it down and the protozoa comes along and eats that bacteria. That releases all of that into the system to be able to use. This soil test identifies that and points us exactly in the right direction where we need to address the soil.
Any other questions? Anybody on the panel have anything more to add?
Thank you for coming, everybody.
We could, I would just, like to say, like, as you've heard, Rachel is, very instrumental in South Portland, and Scarborough has made a big effort and has been successful. The athletic fields in Scarborough have been organic now for 4 or 5 years. This discussion here in Portland, the idea that this can be done on a big picture level. It can be done in a community, it can be done on sports turf, it can be done on residential lawn. There's a learning curve for the homeowner as a do-it-yourselfer. There is a learning curve for the landscape industry, and a learning curve for municipal management. And the science is all there. It's just ramping up the education and the fact that it can be done, and then really the next step for protection of the environment, protection of Casco Bay in particular out here, and then human and children's health. And my focus on this is children's health, because, the idea that you heard Dr. Porter a little while ago, talked about that low-dose exposure. And that's what happens when Dad goes out in the backyard and puts down bag 1 of the 4-step program that's weed and feed. It's a low-dose exposure, and then the kids are out there and playing in it, and they're getting an exposure. Then they go play soccer or football or baseball, and they're repeatedly exposed to low doses of pre- and post-emergence herbicides. So that really is the problem, and that's where the focus on public policy change really needs to happen to be protective. And, I get into the situation where I have to refute the conventional industry, so I go head-to-head all the time. And they say, we have a protected right to apply our pesticides. But the bottom line, when you really think about it, is we have smoking laws now for secondhand smoke, and people don't have the right now to blow smoke in my face. Do they really have a right to put down 2,4-D next door to me, where the chances are some of that is going to make an impact on my property? So that really is, and that's what preemption laws are. In the 1990s, the pesticide industry went to all 50 states. 43 states adopted laws, and preemption was created or brought into place by the pesticide industry to protect their right to put pesticides down when, where, and any time they wanted. And the legislators in the 1990s, home rule went out the window. And it was all for pesticide use. And that's where we now have to stand up and take back that ground and say that, putting poisons in areas where children play, where children live, where we live in an urban environment is as important as, that reduction in our food supply and all of that. So public policy, working towards public policy has to be, the ultimate goal. And, the fact is now that we can do it. We simply don't need these products anymore. But it's a tough battle because these products generate lots of money for major corporations. It's all about revenue.